Okay, welcome to a new episode of Nate's MMA Corner. I am Nate, and if you watch my show, you're in my corner. So today's episode is a post-fight show for UFC 209, Woodley versus Thompson, part 2. Yeah, and the co-main event was David Tamer versus Lando Venata in the lightweight division. And yeah, the main event was a welterweight title clash with Woodley and Thompson. So yeah, it was, in my opinion, this entire event was stacked top to bottom with fighters that the die-hard core fans know. But in terms of the casual fan, they may not recognize a lot of these names. But like David Tamer, I knew who he was. Lando Venata, same thing. And then Dan Kelly, he's been in the UFC for quite a while. Talented middleweight. Then, of course, a lot of people know who Alistair Overeem is. And he was the highest purse. Him and Mark Hunt were the two highest purses on this card. Yeah, so this is a post-fight show, the main card. And let's get started. So, the main event was a welterweight UFC title clash with Tyrone Woodley versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for, yeah, the UFC welterweight championship of the world. And okay, like I got criticized when I was watching this fight with some people for booing this fight, and then I told the guy sitting next to me, I said, well, listen to the TV, and then you could hear on the TV all the boos going through the arena for the main event. Yeah, there's a lot of Stephen waiting for Tyrone to throw something or go for some sort of takedown, and then Stephen was going to counter. And then on the flip side, you had Woodley waiting for Thompson to throw something flashy to leave himself open for a takedown, so Woodley could use his wrestling and shoot in for a double leg or a single leg and get that big takedown and pound him out and wear him out for a bit. And then for the first 2 rounds, it was just them stalling and waiting for something to happen. And then the guy sitting next to me was like, oh, it's like a chess match. And it's like, yes, I get it. It's like a chess match, but imagine that chess match having a player on both sides just going, well, gee, I'm going to take my time and think about what he might do when he does make a move, and then vice versa, and then it turns into this big waiting thing that reaches to a point where you've got to do something. You can't just sit there for ages. I mean, I get it, you're waiting for something to happen, and then you can counter, but I mean, in chess, you got to eventually make a move, so yeah. This fight was just, it was frustrating, but I had low expectations going into this rematch after what happened with the last match being a draw, and I felt Woodley won the first match, but it almost didn't matter because it was just so drawn out. And but I mean, more happened in the first fight, at least. This one, not a whole lot happened, but I'm still a fan of Woodley and I'm still a fan of Thompson. They seem like good guys, and they're talented fighters, but just the way stylistically this match happened, I think that if Woodley was fighting a guy with a strong wrestling background, he would have been letting his hands go and realize that, what, this is the ground game's neutralized, so we're going to have to stand and bang a bit here. And then, Woodley would, of course, use head movement, footwork to avoid getting hit, but he would still be throwing punches on a regular basis. And Thompson, on the other hand, I think if he fought someone that was stand-up, he would have been more letting his hands and feet go and landing some flashy kicks. But because it was primarily striker versus grappler in this fight, that it was sort of, okay, let's wait and see what this guy's going to do in this round and that round and that round, and then it just kind of dragged out. And then the fifth and final round, Tyrone Woodley went for broke a bit because he's like, well, I got to do something, and I got to try to finish this guy. And so I think it was a smart move on Woodley, and that's what really won him the fight more than anything else, I think. So yes, Tyrone Woodley defended the belt by majority decision, and yeah, this wraps up this whole feud between Thompson and Woodley. There's some good contenders at welterweight for Woodley, with the winner of Maya and Masvidal as a possible next contender, and yeah, there's some. I think the next Woodley title defense will be a bit more interesting. Then you have the co-main event with David Tamer and Lando Venata. David Tamer was on The Ultimate Fighter, and Lando Venata was that short replacement going up against Tony Ferguson in his UFC debut that put on that fight of the night performance, but still lost to Tony Ferguson. No shame in that, because obviously Tony's in title mix in lightweight. But yeah, Lando Venata though put on a striking clinic with David Tamer, and David Tamer obliged and put on a striking clinic on Venata, and it was decision unanimous, 30-27 across the board for David Tamer. I would argue that the first round maybe went to Lando Venata. Lando did have, I think, his best performance in the first round, but yeah, rounds, I felt like the later rounds definitely David Tamer found his groove and squeaked out that win. But it was an easy fight for David Tamer, but I mean, Lando Venata is a talented guy, and yeah, I am happy for David Tamer. He's one of my favorite fighters at lightweight, but I also like Lando Venata, and I think, don't let the record in UFC fool you. Lando Venata is now, 1-2, but I mean, he's fought, in those 3 matches, talented guys, and John McDessie and Tony Ferguson, and now David Tamer. And so Lando Venata, we're definitely going to see more of him, and he's definitely going to put on some more exciting fights, and hopefully he can string up some wins. And David Tamer, yeah, the sky could be the limit for this guy. He could be the superstar for Sweden in the lightweight division. Then in the, so yeah, David Tamer wins unanimous decision, and it was pretty much a stand-up war in that fight. Then in the middleweight division, we had Dan Kelly versus Rashad Evans, and this fight was decision split win for Dan Kelly. This was a tough battle because there was moments where Rashad let his hands go a bit, and then Dan Kelly looked like he was getting the better though, because he was just a bigger guy and was able to use his size and, I believe, reach advantage on Rashad Evans. And Dan Kelly really made a name for himself in this fight. Dan Kelly is, as many of you know, is a judo extraordinaire. He's an expert, and Dan Kelly, if this went to the ground, I think he would have known what to do with Rashad Evans. But like I said on my pre-fight show, that Rashad has that collegiate wrestling background, Dan Kelly has a judo background. So I didn't see this going to the ground because I thought it's going to be neutralized and it's going to stay stand-up. And yeah, I got this one wrong. I thought Rashad would use his boxing and get a knockout eventually. But Rashad took some hard shots in this fight, and Dan Kelly was able to use his size to his advantage in this, I think, and use his reach. So Dan Kelly squeaked out the win, and I think it was a justifiable win. I think the judges got it right. But it was a close fight, but yeah, Dan Kelly definitely won this fight. And yeah, it was a split decision win for Dan Kelly. And he's racked up multiple wins at this point, so I think his next fight should be another name opponent. Then in the women's strawweight division, we had Amanda Cooper, who's the runner-up on Ultimate Fighter, going up against Cynthia Calvillo. And Cynthia trains at Team Alpha Male, and then you had Amanda Cooper, who has a boxing background but also has a solid jiu-jitsu background. And I thought that for sure Amanda Cooper was going to maybe stand and bang a bit with Cynthia, then use her grappling and get a submission win. But it went the other way around. Cynthia won submission rear naked choke, round 1, 3 minutes 19 seconds. So Cynthia really made a name for herself in this fight, because Amanda Cooper, the fans that watch Ultimate Fighter know Amanda Cooper, and Cynthia just she did great on the ground. Her jiu-jitsu skills looked really good, and she was able to get dominant position after dominant position, and you could tell that she stuck to what I believe the Gracies are the ones that said this: position over submission, which means, don't just bum rush for that quick submission, because it may not be there, or you might lose it right away, and then what? You could be in a non-dominant position. And Cynthia was keeping tabs every time they were rolling around on the ground, that it was, position over submission, and she would eventually work her way to those dominant positions to get the submission, and it played out. I mean, she took her back and choked her out. So she landed that rear naked choke in the first round, and it was an impressive win for Cynthia. And one could argue that maybe she was also in consideration for performance bonus, because it was a good fight. But anyways, great fight. Then to kick off the main card, we had a heavyweight clash with one of my all-time favorite fighters, Alistair the Reem Overeem, versus Mark Hunt. And this fight, I mean, again, how some of you know how I'm just in love with the heavyweight division. It's my favorite weight class. And then I like Mark Hunt, I like Alistair Overeem. They're both great strikers. Alistair Overeem, I want him to be champ one of these days. And he did his thing. I mean, he took his time, he picked his shots, he was super cautious, super careful, but he knew eventually he would land something, and it played out. Round 3, 1 minute 44 seconds, KO knees. I mean, he landed that heavy knee, and it just dropped Mark Hunt, and then he was pouncing on him. And I mean, Alistair Overeem, he's again in title mix. I mean, he just beat a top 10 guy, finished him after having that illness, I believe, of the food poisoning, with stomach issues. And so Alistair Overeem is back. I mean, he was already ranked in the top 5 going into this fight, but he, bounces back after the loss in the title fight to Stipe. So Alistair Overeem did his thing, and he's definitely back in title mix, and I couldn't be happier about that. And that wraps up the post-fight show for this, and stay tuned in the coming days for my pre-fight for, I believe it's Belfort versus Gastelum. It's UFC Fight Night, Belfort versus Gastelum, and it's going to be a great middleweight clash of the ages UFC Fight Night. And I'll do a pre-fight show of that with my predictions, and so stay tuned for that in the coming days. And until then, see ya.